Before the mid-18th century, Nepal was not the unified country we know it as today. The region encompassed many smaller independent kingdoms with distinct rulers, courts, and cultural identities. Each kingdom controlled a specific area, creating a patchwork of small states. Nepal's fractured existence made it vulnerable to foreign colonization. Keep watching to find out how Nepal became the unified country we know it as today. Where is Nepal and why did it need unification? Nestled in the mighty Himalayas, Nepal is renowned for its awe-inspiring beauty and ancient cultural traditions. It is home to Mount Everest, the world's tallest peak, and the birthplace of Gautama Buddha. Nepal is a landlocked country in South Asia, sandwiched between two giants, India to the south and China to the north. Before the 18th century, Nepal consisted of many small kingdoms. The most powerful were the Malla kingdoms of Kathmandu, Bhaktapur, and Patan. These kingdoms controlled the Kathmandu Valley, an area of immense cultural and economic significance. In addition to these Malla kingdoms, there were other regional powers. Each group controlled specific regions, and they were often in conflict over territorial dominance. The necessity for unification arose from both internal and external pressures. Externally, the British East India Company was rapidly expanding in South Asia, and there was a growing threat that Nepal's fractured state could make it vulnerable to colonization. Internally, the constant wars between the kingdoms weakened the region and disrupted economic prosperity. The rulers of these small kingdoms were often embroiled in battle, not just for territory, but also for control of trade routes with Tibet, today an autonomous region of China, and India. In the mid-18th century, a visionary leader named Prithvi Narayan Shah embarked on a quest to unify Nepal. He was the ruler of the Gorkha kingdom, and he aimed to create a centralized state that could resist external threats and ensure long-time peace and stability within the region. Historical background. For centuries, the region we now call Nepal was a mosaic of small states, each with a unique identity. The Kathmandu Valley, known as the Nepal Mandala, was the cultural and political heart of the kingdom. The Malla kings had ruled it since the 13th century. Art, architecture, and culture flourished during the Malla period, especially within the valley. However, this golden age was marred by constant rivalry between the Malla kingdoms. In the 15th century, the Kathmandu Valley was divided into three competing states: Kathmandu, Patan, and Bhaktapur. These three kingdoms were locked in nearly continuous conflict for dominance of the valley, despite being just a few miles apart. This division weakened the region and made it susceptible to outside influence, particularly from the powerful kingdoms in India. Outside the valley, numerous other kingdoms and tribal groups ruled over different regions. Under Prithvi Narayan Shah's leadership, the Gorkhas were one of these more minor powers. Although the Gorkha kingdom was geographically small and relatively poor, it had a fierce warrior tradition. The kingdom's strategic position west of the Kathmandu Valley and its rugged mountain terrain gave it some natural advantages. However, it was still far from being a dominant force in the region. In the 1740s, the Mughal Empire in India was in decline, and new threats, notably the British East India Company, began to loom on the horizon. The British had already established control over much of India and were set on expanding northward into the Himalayas. Nepal's fragmented political state made it a likely target for British imperial ambitions. Prithvi Narayan Shah recognized that the entire region risked falling under foreign control unless Nepal's various kingdoms could be united. He saw the need for a strong, unified state to protect Nepal's sovereignty and ensure its long-term survival. Prithvi Narayan Shah. Prithvi Narayan Shah was born in 1723 to King Narabhupal Shah and Queen Kushalyavati Devi, the rulers of the small kingdom of Gorkha. From a young age, Prithvi demonstrated ambition, intelligence, and a strong sense of leadership. He was exposed to political and military affairs early on, observing how the Gorkha kingdom was dwarfed by the wealth and power of the Kathmandu Valley kingdoms, despite its strategic location. As he aged, Prithvi's vision expanded beyond the confines of his kingdom. He was deeply influenced by the stories of legendary rulers from Indian and Himalayan history, and he dreamed of unifying the fractured kingdoms of Nepal. When Prithvi Narayan Shah ascended the throne in 1743 at the age of 20, he inherited a relatively modest kingdom. The Gorkha kingdom was landlocked, lacked significant economic resources, and was surrounded by powerful neighbors. However, what it lacked in wealth, it made up for in the determination of its people and its strategic location in the rugged mountainous terrain. The battle for the Kathmandu Valley. One of Prithvi Narayan Shah's most ambitious goals was conquering the Kathmandu Valley, the region's cultural, political, and economic heart. The valley's three kingdoms, Kathmandu, Patan, and Bhaktapur, were rich in resources and strategically positioned on the trade routes connecting India and Tibet. Whoever controlled the valley would effectively control Nepal. However, conquering the Kathmandu Valley was no easy feat. The Malla kingdoms were heavily fortified and well defended. Additionally, they were wealthy, with resources to hire mercenaries and acquire the best weapons available at the time. Prithvi Narayan Shah's campaign to capture the valley began with the conquest of Nuwakot, a small but strategically vital town located northwest of Kathmandu and heavily fortified. Nuwakot controlled one of the key trade routes between Tibet and Nepal. Prithvi knew controlling Nuwakot would cut off Kathmandu's trade with Tibet, weakening the valley's economic base. In 1744, after several attempts, Prithvi Narayan Shah successfully captured Nuwakot, marking the first significant victory in his unification campaign. This conquest boosted his kingdom's morale and gave him control over valuable trade routes. It also provided a base from which he could launch future assaults on the Kathmandu Valley. The next target in the unification campaign would be a fortified hill town near Kathmandu called Kirtipur. It had long been a thorn in the side of Prithvi Narayan Shah's ambitions, as it was one of the strongest defensive positions protecting the valley. In 1757, Prithvi launched his first assault on Kirtipur, which ended in disaster. The defenders, backed by the Malla kingdoms, fiercely resisted, and the Gorkha forces were repelled with heavy casualties. According to historical accounts, Prithvi Narayan Shah narrowly escaped with his life. Many of his soldiers were killed or severely wounded, and the defeat was a significant setback for his campaign. Despite this loss, he was undeterred. He spent the next several years rebuilding his army and refining his strategy. In 1764, he launched a second attack on Kirtipur. This time, he was prepared. The siege lasted for several months, and after intense fighting, the Gorkhas successfully captured Kirtipur. Prithvi Narayan Shah ordered brutal retribution against the defenders of Kirtipur. According to some accounts, he ordered the nose and lips of the captured soldiers to be cut off as a warning to other towns that might resist his rule. Though harsh, this gruesome action instilled fear in the remaining Malla kingdoms and marked a turning point in the unification campaign, revealing Prithvi as a force to fear. Another aspect of this unification campaign is Prithvi Narayan Shah's use of psychological warfare. As we've seen, he could be vicious. One of his tactics was to plant spies before launching attacks on the Malla kingdoms. These spies would spread rumors and misinformation. This strategy of sowing discord and fear weakened his enemies from within, allowing him to capture several towns and forts with minimal bloodshed. Following his capture of Kirtipur, Prithvi set his sights on the capital, Kathmandu. In 1768, after years of preparation and careful maneuvering, Gorkha forces successfully entered Kathmandu and captured the city. With the fall of Kathmandu, the other Malla kingdoms quickly followed. By 1769, Prithvi Narayan Shah had established control over the entire Kathmandu Valley, effectively unifying the central part of what we now call Nepal. Despite some of his more gruesome acts, Prithvi Narayan Shah also had a sense of humanity. One story that demonstrates this is his effort to secure the loyalty of his new subjects after his capture of the Kathmandu Valley. He reportedly toured the valley disguised as a commoner, listening to the grievances of the local people and learning about their way of life. This allowed him to understand the region he had conquered better and implement policies that would win the local population's loyalty. His efforts to connect with the people of the Kathmandu Valley humanize him and offer a glimpse into the complexity of his leadership. Diplomat maneuvering and external threats. While Prithvi Narayan Shah was focused on unifying Nepal's fragmented kingdoms, he was also acutely aware of the external threats facing his fledgling state. The British East India Company had begun its march across India, and its influence was spreading northward toward Nepal. At the same time, the Qing dynasty in China was expanding its control over Tibet and other regions near Nepal. Prithvi Narayan Shah knew that his kingdom was in a precarious position. vulnerable to British and Chinese expansionist ambitions. Prithvi Narayan Shah famously referred to Nepal as a yam between two boulders, referring to the precarious position of his small landlocked kingdom between the expanding British Empire in India and the powerful Qing dynasty in China. One of his most remarkable achievements was his ability to balance these external threats while continuing his unification campaign. He recognized that Nepal could not afford to engage the British or the Chinese in direct conflict, so he focused on diplomatic strategies that allowed Nepal to maintain its sovereignty while avoiding confrontation with its powerful neighbors. The aftermath of unification. Nepal's unification was not just a military or political victory. It began a new era for the people of the Himalayan region. Prithvi Narayan Shah's vision for a unified Nepal was not simply about territorial expansion. It was also about creating a robust and centralized state capable of resisting external threats and building internal unity. However, unification was just the first step. In the years following the conquest of the Kathmandu Valley, Prithvi Narayan Shah set about consolidating his newly unified kingdom. He worked to integrate the diverse cultures, languages, and traditions of the various kingdoms that had come under his control. Because of the large variety of ethnic groups and cultures within the kingdom, this was not an easy task. The legacy of Prithvi Narayan Shah and the unification of Nepal. Prithvi Narayan Shah passed away in 1775, just a few years after his successful unification of Nepal. However, his legacy endured long after his death. He is revered in Nepal today as the Father of the Nation, a title that reflects his crucial role in the country's identity and survival in a tumultuous period of history. The unified Nepal that Prithvi Narayan Shah created faced many challenges in the years following his death. His successors continued to expand the kingdom's borders, eventually pushing into Tibet and challenging British influence in India. However, the kingdom also experienced internal strife, including power struggles between different factions of the royal family and regional elites. Despite these challenges, the foundations that Prithvi Narayan Shah laid proved resilient. Nepal remained independent through the 19th and 20th centuries, even as the rest of South Asia fell under British colonial rule. Today, Nepal's sovereignty and unique cultural identity can be traced back to the unification period and the visionary leadership of Prithvi Narayan Shah. How would you like to get a deeper understanding of history, impress your friends, and predict the future more accurately based on past events? If this sounds like something you might be into, then check out the brand new Captivating History Book Club by clicking the first link in the description. To learn more about Nepal and other ancient Himalayan kingdoms, check out our book, History of Nepal, a captivating guide to ancient Himalayan kingdoms, unification, dynastic rulers, and modern times. It's available as an ebook, paperback, and audiobook. If you found the video captivating, please hit the like button and subscribe for more videos like this.